King William IV had been tormented by Queen Victoria's mother, the Duchess of Kent, for years. But just before he died, he finally got his revenge. When William IV became King of the United Kingdom in 1830, England had no idea what it was in for. Bawdy, brassy, and unapologetically obscene, there's a reason the history books tend to skip over this sailor king and his brief, dramatic reign. William's rise to the English throne was never supposed to happen. Born on August 21st, 1765 to the Mad King George III and Queen Charlotte, William was the third son of the dysfunctional royal couple, and his parents never imagined their younger son would rule England one day. In fact, William's road to the crown was long and twisted. Even as a child, William went wild for all things naval. When he was just 13, he took his obsession to the next level, and the princeling joined up with the Royal Navy to become a lowly midshipman. While on his assigned ship, William reveled in acting like the other commoners on the boat, apparently even doing his own cooking. 19th century sailors weren't famous for their decorum and politeness, and William also threw his noble breeding overboard the minute his ship sailed into the sea. One day, this had scandalous consequences. While at a bar in Gibraltar, he got into an actual brawl, and he paid a high price. He got himself thrown behind bars in the process. It was a dramatic situation, and it was about to get even worse. The minute England's prodigal son heard the cell door clink, he didn't want to be one of the boys on the ship anymore, and decided to turn things into a do-you-know-who-I-am situation real quick. William made sure word got around about who he really was, and the guards released him post-haste. I guess he only wanted to be a commoner some of the time, a royal privilege. When William was a young man, the American Revolution raged on the other side of the Atlantic. The daring royal decided he just had to go where the action was, and ended up serving in New York. This feat made him the only British royal to ever do so, but being a royal prince and all put a very dangerous target on his back. His need for action almost started an international incident. During the conflict, General George Washington was eyeing the upstart prince. Washington even hatched a plan to kidnap him, since the royal was foolish enough to put himself in danger's way. Luckily for William, England got wise to the plot and upped his guard detail. But that wouldn't be William's last connection to Washington, as you will see. When the Napoleonic Wars rolled around in the 1790s, the young William was out of the Navy, but still desperate to fight. He was utterly offended when England said, "Thanks, but no thanks, Your Highness." As it turns out, their reasons were pretty embarrassing. Historians point to two big reasons why William didn't serve against Napoleon, and they are whoppers. First, William had apparently broken his arm after a tipsy fall down some stairs. Second, he'd just given a public speech against the conflict. Maybe the Navy had a point. Prince William more than matched his naval scandals in the bedroom. In 1790, the young prince watched beautiful Irish actress Dorothea Jordan perform on Drury Lane, and quickly fell madly in lust with her. He couldn't have picked a more scandalous crush. People of the time saw acting as a disgraceful, immoral profession, and a prince dating an actress was a big breach of decorum. And then there was Dorothea herself. Notoriously long-legged and sultry on the stage, Dorothea already had many illegitimate children and scores of illicit affairs before she met our Will. It wasn't exactly like William himself was so pure and virginal when he met Dorothea. He'd actually become vastly unpopular in the Navy, mostly because he wouldn't stop getting himself embroiled in endless love affairs. Still, William actually seemed to love Dorothea deeply, despite her scandalous profession, and in 1791, he moved in with her, living in sin, because their classes were too different for an official state-recognized wedding. The controversial couple then proceeded to have a whopping 10 illegitimate children together over the years, and for a time they built a happy domestic life. Then suddenly, William dealt Dorothea a heartbreaking betrayal. In 1811, William's decade-long love affair with the beautiful actress came to a crashing halt. Almost without warning, he kicked her out of their shared house and cut off almost all contact with her immediately. According to Dorothea, William was tired of paying her hefty wifely allowance and dumped her for money, my good friend. And he wasn't done yet. William's only mercy to his former lover was to give her custody of their children together on one condition. Dorothea had to promise never to return to the disgraceful stage. So, when deeply in debt she took on a role to pay the bills, William took his cruelty to the next level. He wrenched their children away from their mother, as well as the extra money he'd been giving for their care. This would have terrible consequences. William never lifted a finger to help Dorothea again, and her acting career faltered entirely. Eventually, she had to flee to France to escape her debtors. Alone and penniless, William's common-law wife came to a tragic end in Paris just 5 years after their split. But as Dorothea fell, William rose. In 1828, William was Lord High Admiral of England, and misuse of power doesn't even begin to describe this period of his life. One day, he got into such a tiff with his counselors that he took to the seas with a fleet of ships, told nobody where he was going, and disappeared for 10 days. He was quickly forced to resign, aka got super fired. And then the heat really started turning up. In 1817, the royal family went into crisis mode, and William was right smack dab in the middle of it. The heir to the throne died, and suddenly William and his brothers needed to produce a new one, only none of them had one. They were all either trapped in loveless, childless marriages, or like William, flying solo. In other words, William's royal duty was to find a wife, and fast. It didn't exactly go as planned. William's brood of illegitimate children weren't the easiest sell for finding a bride, and he was in for a royal embarrassment. His first pick was the young and eligible Princess Augusta. He sent his younger brother Adolphus to do his wooing. That may have been a mistake. It backfired big time. Not only did the girl's father refuse the match, Adolphus soon betrayed his brother and married the princess himself. In 1818, William settled on marrying Princess Adelaide, a pious, pretty girl who was somehow willing to overlook his many previous children. If that sounds unromantic, it definitely was. When the engagement went through, William wrote to his eldest son, "She is doomed. Poor, dear, innocent young creature to be my wife." William and Adelaide married after knowing each other for only a week. There was also a huge age difference between the two, with William being almost 3 decades older than the 25-year-old Adelaide. Still, they tried to be good to each other. Everyone expected William to produce the next heir to the throne, and there was a lot of pressure on him to do it ASAP. After all, William was the healthiest of his surviving brothers, he had a fresh new wife, and he also already had a brood of illegitimate children to prove his vitality. So when Princess Adelaide became pregnant immediately after the royal wedding, all of Europe held its breath. In March 1819, Adelaide was 7 months pregnant, and she and William eagerly awaited their child. Then disaster struck. Adelaide went into premature labor. She gave birth to a baby girl, Charlotte, who lived only a few desperate hours. The royal couple was devastated, but their heartaches would only grow. Over the next 3 years, Adelaide was almost perpetually pregnant, but it all came to nothing. The princess suffered miscarriage after miscarriage, and any children she brought to term survived only months at most. In 1822, her last confirmed pregnancy ended in stillborn twin boys. No matter how much the couple wanted it, they simply could not produce an heir to the throne of England. By 1830, it was clear William's brother, King George IV, wasn't long for this world, and William was about to become King of England. William's last words to his sibling gave away both his sorrow and his excitement. He told the dying monarch, "God's will be done. I have injured no man." Then, on June 26, 1830, the previously unthinkable happened. William IV finally became ruler. As you can imagine, it was not smooth sailing. From day one, it was clear William wasn't your average king. For one, he was completely opposed to having an official coronation, and only agreed to a sparse, no-frills affair after his counselors badgered him incessantly about it. When the traditionalists threatened to boycott this cheaper half-crown nation, King William hissed back that he'd love for them to skip it altogether. Then there was what he did at the coronation itself. King William actually caused a downright scandal on his big day. Though Queen Adelaide was taking the coronation solemnly, William made it crystal clear he hated the whole business, acting like a character in a comic opera the entire time, and not, his own coronation ceremony. But William was just getting started. According to lore, William's immediate reaction when he heard he was now king was one for the history books. His attendants roused him out of bed to tell him the massive news, but the king went right back into his chambers after hearing it. When his attendants protested, his response was legendary. He saucily announced that he had never yet slept with a queen. William IV's behavior as king would make Queen Elizabeth II choke on her tea. The new monarch grew notorious for hosting dinner parties where he'd just call up hotels for their guest lists, invite anyone and everyone he knew, and then explain to his guests not to bother about clothes. Apparently, he did not enjoy spending the evenings at home, saying, "The queen does nothing but embroider flowers after dinner." With such scandalous behavior, he was bound to make some enemies. One in particular would cause him endless grief. Without any biological children, William and Adelaide tried to dote on their young niece and heir, Princess Victoria. That's right, the future Queen Victoria. There was just one enormous problem. William loathed Victoria's mother, the Duchess of Kent, with the burning fire of 1,000 suns. And guess what? The Duchess very much deserved it. William and Adelaide had enough personal problems in their life, but the Duchess of Kent made things 10 times worse. Knowing she was the mother of a future Queen of England, the Duchess lorded it over the childless William and his wife, and even demanded she get her own royal apartments and stables because of her status. But that was just the beginning. The Duchess of Kent was such a piece of work she had no problem being massively rude right to the royal couple's faces. She often refused to acknowledge that Queen Adelaide was above her in station, and would make big shows of not attending court because William's illegitimate children scandalized her delicate sensibilities. William's relationship with his illegitimate children was, shall we say, somewhat complicated. Although William's daughters were supposedly fresh-faced, lively company, his sons were notoriously vicious, greedy, and constantly at his door for more money, particularly his eldest son, George. In 1837, tragedy visited William's doorstep once more when his daughter Sophia passed in childbirth. Yet little did he know one cruelty would give way to another. The news brought a letter of condolence from his bitterly estranged son George, and the aging William hoped a reconciliation was on the horizon. It wasn't. George stayed venomous until the very end, never believing his father gave him enough money. The ghost of William's old lover, Dorothea, must not have let him sleep at night, because several years after her tragic passing in 1816, William commissioned a sculpture of her and possibly even tracked down and acquired a professional portrait depicting her in her glory days on the stage. As we'll see, that wasn't all he felt guilty about. Remember how William was almost kidnapped by none other than George Washington? Well, apparently, William didn't hold grudges. Later in his life, he dined with an American ambassador and confessed how much he regretted not being a free, independent American, since the country was home to George Washington, the greatest man that ever lived. A little dinner-time flattery? Maybe, but it worked. The American ambassador adored him. In 1831, William made his most shocking move yet, and he did it by simply opening a door. That year, Parliament was in the middle of the reform crisis, and the king knew just what to do. At the Prime Minister's urgent request, the strapping William made a surprise appearance at the House of Lords to dissolve the government, and pandemonium broke out. The king showing up to Parliament was a really big deal, and when William walked into the room, one man was so excited he actually started brandishing a whip. The rest of the lords only acted slightly better, but William simply put on his crown, strode past, and dissolved the Parliament like a boss. Sure, absolute power corrupts, especially if you don't actually have it. The King's Parliament entrance also produced another classic William moment. When he was getting ready to head to the building, his attendants initially informed him that they couldn't get the horses ready fast enough. William's response was priceless. Never one for patience or politeness, William just shouted back, "Then I will go in a hackney cab." Let's just say this would have been a much less impressive entrance. William really didn't have time for pomp and circumstance, and his lack of decorum extended to his possessions. Most infamously, the King of England would not stop trying to sell Buckingham Palace, which he found stuffy and uninhabitable to almost everyone's horror. His first half-baked plot saw him trying to turn it into barracks, and the second into a parliament building. Luckily, no one took the bait. William might not have wanted to be a down-to-earth ruler, but he wasn't above pulling rank when it suited him. When his great friend, the legendary Admiral Horatio Nelson, got married, William wasted no time on pleasantries and simply insisted on walking the bride down the aisle. Even the mighty Nelson had to say, "Yes, sir." But before long, William would be showing his might in darker ways. When William inherited the throne, he was 64 years old, the oldest person to have ever taken the crown at that point. Still, William very much proved that older doesn't necessarily mean wiser. Overall, William held pretty conservative beliefs, and once even publicly opposed abolitionists in the House of Lords, a move that shocked and confused even his not-so-progressive contemporaries who just wanted the out-of-touch king to sit down and shut up. But don't get it twisted, the philandering William also supported more lenient adultery laws, so he could be liberal when it benefited his debauched lifestyle, that is. By the 1830s, William was getting on in years, and just before his passing, he insisted that his aide destroy all of his correspondences, though luckily a fraction of his letters still survive. What exactly was the king hiding? Oh, nothing much other than immense guilt. One of his letters is a message from his ill-fated daughter Sophia, begging to come live with him after his split from her mother Dorothea. William flat out refused the poor girl. That's some pretty heartless parenting. On the day of his own birthday banquet in 1837, the aging William really let his old enemy, the Duchess of Kent, have it. He stood up in front of everyone and announced that since the Duchess was incompetent to act with propriety, he simply vowed to live until his niece Victoria came of age at 18, just so the Duchess could never gain real power as regent. The announcement made all the women in attendance burst into tears. But did he manage to do it? In the end, not even the great sailor king William IV could stop the Reaper. On June 20th, 1837, William slipped away from this world after suffering heart failure at Windsor Castle. But even in death, he somehow managed to get his ingenious revenge. William passed just weeks after his niece Victoria came of age at 18. That's right. He really did will himself